First of all, thank you for the invitation to this conference. I'm Donguk Hwang from NIMS. Actually, this presentation, when I prepared, it was a little bit scary to me because it's a mathematical conference, but my background is physics, so it's a little bit nervous. But let me try this. So the content of this talk will not go in details of mathematics, but I want to just introduce a kind of new field which is emerging in the science community. And the problem is that need a lot of work by mathematicians. So I would like to introduce this new field, and I hope many people are interested in this and join this project in the future. So the title of the talk will be Graph and Brain. 반대로. Now it works.
Yeah, you can use the keyboard.
keyboard. 여기 꽂혀있는 게 많아요. Motion makes me scary. First of all, I would like to talk about why we need to study brain. When we think about the brain, many people think about brain disease for the first time. Yes, that's true. The studying brain, one of the reasons of studying brain is to make to cure brain disease typically. So in the brain disease, there are a couple of famous diseases which is well known to the scientists, like the Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer, epilepsy, autism, schizophrenia. These kind of diseases have some kind of common factor in it. Some of them, like schizophrenia or autism, was considered as a kind of mental disorder in the past, which means this disease comes from surroundings of patients, not biological disorders. But nowadays, some evidence shows that this can be related to the biological disorder also. Like there is a problem with the connection in the brain. If there is a problem with the cell in the brain, then that causes this kind of disease. So these brain diseases are now in the field of biology and science. And the problem of brain disease is it is very difficult to find the cause of disease, which means it makes it difficult a way to cure the disease. And apart from the brain disease, there's other people who are interested in studying brain, which is the people from information technologies, mainly who are studying the computer. So usually we can compare the brain and computer to get some idea of information technologies. Like in the computer science, recognition performance is one of the problems. When you compare the recognition ability of computer and human beings, in most cases human beings have much better recognition performance. This can be when it's like this. Nowadays, the very funny technology when you use internet. Usually you upload your image to the internet, then the website made your pictures, like Picasa done by Google. new technology of the Picasa is face recognition in the website. So when you assign the name on some specific pictures, the website, the computer will recognize similar face. But the funny thing is, it cannot decide. Some picture looks like you, but they cannot decide. So they usually ask you, is it you or not? So if you say yes, then it confirms it is your pictures. So that means recognition performance is much less than human being. Of course, there is another information about the pictures, but typically recognition is very hard issue in the information technologies. Other things which brain can do better compared to computer is imaginations, learning by abstractions, data association. Eventually, people think about artificial intelligence. As you know, the artificial intelligence is it's developing, but it's still not enough to mimic the human brain. So these technique. The people who study this technique need understanding the brain structure or how the information processed in the brain. So that is the reason why we are interested in the study of the brain. And then I will talk a little bit about the brain. So this picture shows the macroscopic view of the brain. These are called cortex, outermost tissues of the brain, and there is a small area called the cerebrum. Or inside the cortex, there is many substructure inside. The funny thing, when you see some part of the brain, there are a lot of similar cells called the neurons, and those neurons are connected in a complicated way in a small area. If you see the one neuron, the neurons looks like this. So the single neuron is a unit of information processor in the brain, and how the information was processed is something like this. So the external input comes through the dendrite of the neurons. If the input satisfies certain criteria, then the body of the neuron generates the action potential, electric potential. Then it propagates through the axon, and at the end of the axon terminal, it transmits neurotransmitter to send the signal to the next neurons. So this small unit is used to process the information in the brain. And when you go back to the whole brain is connected it consists of these kind of neurons, humongous number of these neurons, and they choose complicated structure of complicated networks. So I summarize this way. I put some data from other place. Usually the cerebral cortex, which is the most important part in the brain of the human, is typically have 15 to 33 billion neurons, and each neuron has 10,000 synaptic connections, which means overall the number of connections is hundreds of trillion connections inside the brain. So you can imagine that the connection itself is very important in the brain, which the information is processed. And moreover, there is some evidence why the connection between the neurons are important. Most well-known thing is synaptic plasticity, which is the ability of connection between two neurons to change in strength. So what it means is, if two neurons are active at the same time, the connection between two neurons became strong. But if their behavior is incoherent, the connection between two neurons became small. So that means if some information have processed in different neurons, if two neurons have some common paths, they have same activity, then the connection should be stronger. So the connection of neurons is important. The other things, other facts related to the connectivity is One of the thing is associate memory. The associate memory is something like this. When you think about the apples, you can imagine the shapes, smell, taste, and texture when you touch the apples. Why this is important is the area which processes this kind of information is apart in the brain, like a shape. Shape is processed in this area, the occipital lobe, which is real part of your brain. And when you imagine the smell, this part is done here. And the texture is processed by here, the motor sensory area, which means neurons are apart, but they are associated in some way to imagine something. Another example is the processing of information processing, the way of information processing, typically called bottom-up or top-down processing. So these pictures, by these pictures you may imagine what is bottom-up and top-down processing. When you see these pictures, you can see there is some kind of circular things here and here, here and here. How do you know this is circular things? If this is too small and you don't need to move your eye to see the pictures, then that's easy. But if this circle is very large and you have to move your eyes to recognize the circles, your eye moves fastly along the circles and information is gathering. The gathered information processed and processed information combined, and then you recognize it is circle. So it means there should have kind of hierarchical structures. From the bottom you may get some raw materials and then process. Finally you get the meaning or you get the recognition of the object. But funny thing of this picture is these four circles are not complete, which means it has some kind of missing part here, and you can see that there is some white things overlaid on the top of the circles. But you know that that's the kind of illusion, because each one separately you may imagine that it's a kind of hangman. Right? It's a four hangmans, but when you put it together, you can see that this square, white square. That means once you see some part of the circle, you can imagine lasting part of the image, which is covered by white square. So this will be, you may guess, this will be this kind of circles, but it's covered with this white square. So that is called top-down processing. Once you get the recognition, the resting part, which you cannot see, is imagined by the top-down process, which means so from bottom up, your raw information became refined, and on the top you have recognition. But by the recognition, the other information will be modified based on your recognition. That is bottom-up or top-down processing. And this means there is certain kind of hierarchical structure in the brain to process the information. And that means the connectivity structure of the brain is important. Then why people became interested in the connectivity structure in the brain recently, not in the past? Of course, in the past, the connectivity structure was very interesting by many people, but it was very difficult to study. There is some reason to, there is a technological barrier to see the structure. But nowadays, a couple of new technology enable us to see the connectivity structure. These two are those technologies. The left one is called detailed MRI imaging, which is measuring the diffusion properties of water molecule in the brain. So when you see the MRI imaging, each boxes which measure the magnetic properties of some small area tells you that diffusion property of water molecule. By some kind of processing called tractography, you can reconstruct the tracks a possible track of where water molecule pass through. And by this, people think that the neural connection can be reconstructed with this way. And this picture shows you that one of the examples of reconstructed neural connection inside the brain. And the other technology is the technology called the brain ball. So these are neurons, and they show some kind of complicated structure behind. And before this technology, to see the neuron, you have to stain the neurons by some kind of chemicals. But the problem is, it always has just one color, like a black or blue. So you cannot distinguish whether when they are very close to each other. But recent technology give you the ability to painting the neurons with different colors. So this one have yellow, this one have red, this one have blue. So all the adjacent neurons have different colors. So if they have some branch, you can distinguish which stem comes from, which dendrite comes from which neurons. So these technologies give you the ability to study the connectivity structure in the brain. Actually last year, there was a huge project launched, sponsored by NIH, which is called the Human Connectome. The goal of the project is to reveal the whole connectivity structure of human brains. So it may take a couple of years, like 3 or 4 years, and it will give you a huge amount of data, which gives you the connectivity structure of the brain. The problem is, we have a huge amount of data, but we don't know how to analyze the structures. So our goal, my team's goal, is developing a method to analyze the connectivity structure of the brain to find the mechanism how the information is processed in the brain. So to do this, I make some kind of analogy. The top part is, I think you are very familiar with this. So this is famous Königsberg sandwich problem. What Olga did in this problem is, the actual problem was very complicated. Problem had bridges, rivers, cities, and of course kings. But he made an abstraction from this picture to just river and bridges, and then he makes a graph. It's to answer certain question, he just focus on the question and make a kind of abstraction from the problems. So this thing should be done in the brain. Brain have complicated structure. There are a lot of strange Latin names here, and it may take 1 year to memorize all the names. But you can change these complicated pictures into the networks, which is much simpler to you. And if you make the matrix from this network, it is much more too easy to analyze something from the brain. Our goal is develop a kind of tools which can work here, which can be applicable to here, and reveal some biological function from the real brains. To do this, I have to mention that recent issues in the graph theory. Because I'm comes from physics field, it is one of the biggest hot topics in the graph theory, which is called complex networks. I think you heard 1,000 times about these topics, so I will skip the details of the complex network. I just want to summarize what they did in past. So scale-free networks, no-one networks became very popular nowadays because of these studies. And this study was possible when the data was available. So the because data was available, the study was expanded to the various problems like internet, social networks, social infrastructures, traffic, protein interaction, gene regulatory, etc., etc. This kind of network can be analyzed because data was available. It is the same situation about the brain because we will have the data and we need analyze. And what it shows was it has non-trivial topologies. It is far from Edwards Rain random graph. And what it shows was most of studies was focused on the information processing in the networks. Like there's a key player in the network which is called the hub. And if you want to see the efficiency of the communication in the network, you may see the path length. If you want to see how quickly information can spread, you may study the population theory. If you want to see the functional organization of the networks, so which part of the network may work on this area, the other part of the network may work the other problem. This kind of study can be done like clustering studies or community structure studies. So these kind of complex network studies give you the ideas of how the real network can be analyzed. So based on this, our direction to study the brain network is these three are our goals. One is the hierarchical structure of the brain. So the top-down process which I talked before, how this process can be related to hierarchical structure of the network is one issue. The other issue is the community structure of the brain, because when you see the brain, when you see the pictures of brain, it is well known which part is related to which function of the human. Like as I told you, this part, the real part is related to the vision processing. 4 part is about the social activities, the smell, and hearings, and texture. All of these are related. But when you see the network, it is nothing with the function. So what we want to do is just want to see study the network structure and want to reveal how they are related to the biological functions. That is the study of community structures. And the rest of the topics we are doing now is dynamical phenomena on the top of the brain networks. Not only the structure, the dynamical behavior is very important topics when you study the epileptic seizures. Because seizures can happen to anybody, but epilepsy means that the people who have the recurrent seizures, which means some brain network is easy to have seizures, but other people does not have. So this kind of, but the epileptic seizure is a kind of dynamic behavior in the brain network. So we are interested in the dynamic phenomena of the brain network. This is summary what I present. So graph theory has a central role to study the brain. And huge amount of quantum data will be available soon. So I hope many mathematicians are interested in this field. Thank you.
Here one shot.